At 17 minutes past 2 in the morning, my sister stood in my kitchen with my car keys in her fist and asked me to say I had been driving. I want to be precise about the order, because the order is the only thing I've ever been good at. First she said, "Frankie, I need you." Then she said, "There was a man." Then she said, "I didn't stop." And then, and this is the part I have gone back over probably 400 times, she looked at the clock on my stove, which runs 4 minutes fast and has for 30 years, because my father set it that way in 1994 and nobody has ever been allowed to fix it. And she said, "We have to decide before it gets light." We. My father came in about 10 minutes behind her. He is 69 years old. He ran a funeral home in Toledo for 34 years. And he came into my kitchen the way he came into every room of his working life. Quiet, unhurried, hands folded, already knowing what everyone was going to need before they knew it themselves. He didn't raise his voice. He never has. He said, "Francis, nobody's hurt by the version that's easier." He had said that sentence to me once before. I was 15, and my mother stood in the doorway with her coat still buttoned and her handbag on her arm. And she did not say anything at all. Which is the thing she has always done, and which turned out to be the most important thing that happened that night. Because inside that handbag, on the kitchen table, my mother's phone recorded 4 hours and 11 minutes. She didn't know. She's 66 years old, and she's taken the minutes for the parish council for 22 years, and she hits record out of habit, the way other people put on a seatbelt. 4 hours and 11 minutes. But the part that changed everything was 11 seconds long. And my mother was the one talking. And I have listened to it more times than I will admit to you. Before I tell you what my mother said in those 11 seconds, and what a woman named Verna Ramsey asked me in a letter 9 months later, tell me what time it is where you are, and what town you're watching from. I want to see how far this one travels. People hear court reporter, and they picture a woman at a little machine. That's not wrong. It's just about 8% of it. I've done it for 19 years. Lucas County mostly. Depositions, civil trials, grand jury when they need me, and a lot of custody hearings, which are the ones you carry home. Here is the job. You sit in a room where everyone else has a side. The lawyers have a side, the witness has a side, even the judge, who isn't supposed to, is a human being with an opinion. And you are the only person in that room who is legally required not to have one. You take down every word, not the gist, not the meaning, the words. If a man says, "I guess maybe," you do not write, "yes." If a woman stops in the middle of a sentence and never finishes it, you mark it, and you leave it unfinished forever. You are not permitted to improve anyone. And after 19 years, something happens to you. It's not a superpower, it's closer to a disfigurement. You stop being able to hear the summary of a conversation. You only hear the words. Somebody says, "We just talked about it," and your head immediately says, "No, you didn't. You said 7 specific things, and 4 of them contradicted each other." I count syllables when I'm nervous. I've done it since I was 23. My ex-husband found it charming for about 2 years. My machine lives in a black case with a broken latch that I keep shut with a hair tie, a purple one. It's been the same hair tie for 6 years. Which is not a story. It's just true. And I'm telling you because it was sitting on my kitchen counter that night, 18 inches from my sister's hand, the whole time. My family has never once asked me what I do. They know I work at the courthouse. My aunt thinks I'm a bailiff. At my sister's campaign kickoff, my father introduced me to a room of donors as Francis. She does the typing over at the county. I want to be fair. I let him. 19 years, and I let him. Every time. Because correcting my father in public was a thing I decided at some point wasn't worth what it cost. So that's the woman standing in the kitchen at 17 minutes past 2. 19 years of being the person nobody looks at, in a family that had never once asked what she was looking at. My father is Gil Hollis, Hollis & Sons Funeral Home on Sylvania Avenue. 34 years. There were no sons. He put it on the sign anyway, because he said it sounded like the business had been there a long time. And by the time anybody thought to ask, it had been. I want to tell you something about him that isn't a criticism, because otherwise none of this makes sense. My father was good at that job. He was extraordinary at it. He was the man you wanted at the worst 48 hours of your life. He knew when to speak and when to stand 2 feet farther back. He kept a comb in his shirt pocket for 34 years, and I have seen him hand it to a widower in a hallway without one word passing between them. He spent his entire adult life making the worst thing that ever happened to a family look composed. And somewhere in there, he stopped being able to tell the difference between making it bearable and making it not true. I was 15 and I worked Saturdays. I answered the phone, I refilled the tissue boxes, I ran the vacuum in the chapel. There was a viewing for a woman named Arlene. Her daughter had ordered a specific spray of yellow roses for the casket, and it had not come because the florist had it down for the wrong day. My father found me in the hallway. When she asks, he said, "You tell her you saw it come off the truck this morning, and we put it in the cooler, and it wilted." But it didn't come. Francis. He crouched down a little. He had kind eyes. He still does. That woman has 11 hours left with her mother. If you tell her the truth, she spends 4 of them on the phone with a florist. Nobody's hurt by the version that's easier. So I said it. She was so relieved. She actually put her hand on my arm and said, "Thank you, sweetheart." I went home and I couldn't eat. I have never been able to explain to anyone why that particular Saturday is the hinge of my entire life. It's such a small thing. It's yellow roses. But I remember standing in the chapel afterward, smelling that carpet. Funeral homes all have the same carpet smell. It's in the fibers. It never comes out. And thinking, he just told me what I saw. 7 years later, I sat down at a steno machine for the first time and read the first line of the Code of Ethics, which says, "The reporter shall preserve the record verbatim, without alteration, addition, or omission." I have never told a living soul that I picked this job because of yellow roses. Now I have to tell you the thing that makes the rest of this hard. And I'd rather not. And I'm going to anyway. Because if I leave it out, the story is a lie, and I'd be doing the family business. 12 years ago, my sister put my car into a parked vehicle in a lot behind a bar on Adams Street. Whitney was 24. She'd had 2 glasses of wine, maybe 3. Nobody was in the other car. Nobody was hurt. It was a crumpled quarter panel and a taillight. $2,840. She was on my policy as an occasional driver. It would have gone on her record. And she was about to start at the county prosecutor's office as an intake clerk, which was, at the time, the entire future of the Hollis family. My father called me at 7 in the morning and said one sentence, "Nobody's hurt by the version that's easier." And I gave a recorded statement to an insurance adjuster in which I said I had been driving. It took 90 seconds. I remember the adjuster's voice was very young, and he said, "Okay, great, thanks so much," at the end, like I'd given him a phone number. I have carried that 90 seconds for 12 years. Not because of the $2,840, because of what I am. and what I sat down at a machine and swore to be. And because there is no version of me that gets to be righteous about a record after that. Nobody in my family has ever mentioned it again. Which I used to think was kindness. It wasn't. It was inventory. Whitney is 36. She's been an assistant to 2 county commissioners, and last spring she filed to run for the seat herself. Her campaign literature was stacked in my mother's mudroom, 4 boxes of it, still in shrink wrap. 5 words across the top of every mailer. She shows up for Toledo. She had borrowed my car Wednesday night because there's a decal on hers, and she was going to a fundraiser at a house in Ottawa Hills where 2 of the neighbors had complained about signage. That's it. That's the whole reason she was in my car. Signage. Frankie, I need you. She was standing in my kitchen in a black coat with the collar up. She smelled like wine and peppermint gum, which is a combination I will now smell for the rest of my life. Where's my car? It's outside. It's fine. It's mostly fine. Whitney, where's my car? There was a man. I want you to understand that I was still, at that moment, thinking about the car. On Detroit, by the Sunoco. He was in the road, Frankie. There's no light there. It's black. It's black at 1 a.m. Is he all right? She didn't answer. Whitney, is he all right? I didn't stop. I asked her 4 questions, and I remember all 4, because I have taken down maybe 11,000 questions in my life, and I know what an evasive answer sounds like, the way a piano tuner knows a flat string. Did you call anybody? I called Dad. Before or after you left the scene? After. How long after? I don't know, a few minutes. Whitney, was it a few minutes or was it more than a few minutes? And she said, and this is verbatim, this is the exact construction. It was however long it took me to figure out what I was going to do. That is not a person who panicked. That is a person who deliberated. My father came in at 29 minutes past 2. He did not ask if she was all right. He did not ask if the man was all right. He put his keys on my counter, and he looked at the clock that runs 4 minutes fast, and he said, "All right, let's get organized." My mother sat down at my kitchen table and put her handbag next to her elbow. On the table. The way she has done at every table in every room since 1979. She did not take her coat off, not once. 4 hours, and she never took her coat off. My father stood. He always stands. 34 years of standing while other people sit is not a habit you retire out of. Here's the situation as I understand it, he said. The situation. Not, your sister hit a man. Not, a man is lying in the road on Detroit Avenue. The situation. The vehicle is registered to Francis. That's the fact everyone starts from. Whether Whitney was behind the wheel is something only 3 people in this room know, and one of them is a lawyer's problem later. Dad, let me finish. Francis, you left here at midnight. You were upset. You'd had a hard week. You drove out to Detroit to clear your head. It's dark, it's a bad stretch, there's no lighting, and something happened that you did not fully register at the time. He had it. Whole. He had it whole in the car on the way over. Whitney's got a race, he said. You've got nothing pending. And there it was. Nothing pending. 19 years, a house, a pension I'm 3 years from, a certification with a number on it that I have kept clean since 2006. Nothing pending. Say it, I said. Say what? Say the word for what you're asking me to do. My father looked at me for a long moment with those kind eyes. I'm asking you to take care of your family. No, the other word. Francis, you want me to give a false statement to a police officer. You want me to obstruct a felony investigation. You want me to do it in a county where I have taken down 400 and some depositions, and where the detective who catches this is going to be somebody who's had coffee in the same break room as me. My sister said, "God, you're so dramatic." And my father said, "Nobody's hurt by the version that's easier." 27 years apart, same 9 words, same cadence. He didn't even know he was quoting himself. My mother did not look up from the table. At 10 minutes to 3, my father's phone rang. He looked at it and stepped into my hallway. And my kitchen is small enough that stepping into the hallway does nothing. It was a man he knows. My father knows everybody in this county. That's what 34 years of funerals buys you. A man who works dispatch. He came back in and said, "He's alive. He's at Toledo Hospital. They've got him in surgery." And my sister exhaled and put both hands flat on the counter and said, Okay. So it's not. Okay. So it's not. She didn't finish it. She didn't have to. I've been taking down unfinished sentences for 19 years, and that one finished itself in every head in that room. So it's not a homicide. His name was Delbert Ramsey. Everybody called him Del. 63 years old. He was the night custodian at Burndale Junior High and had been for 22 years, which meant that half the adults on that side of town had been walked to the nurse's office by him at some point. His car wouldn't turn over in the school lot. It was 14 degrees. He decided to walk the 1.5 miles home rather than call his wife at 1 in the morning, because she had a hip replaced in October and he did not want her driving on ice. That is the entire reason Del Ramsey was in the road. He had a lunch cooler with him, a red one. It stayed in the street for about 6 hours because it was outside the cones and nobody thought about it. And his wife saw a photograph of it in the paper. Now, I want to be honest about the next part, because this is where I stopped being a person you should admire. I did not think about Del Ramsey first. I stood in my kitchen at 10 minutes to 3 in the morning, and the first full thought I had was, if I say yes, this is over in 6 weeks, and nobody ever finds out about 2013. That was first. That thought came first. I'm not going to dress it up. At about 3:15, my father started assigning. He told my mother to be ready to say Whitney had been at their house since midnight. He told Whitney to go through her phone. He said the words, "before anybody asks for it," and my sister nodded and started scrolling. And I opened the drawer under my microwave, and I took out a yellow legal pad and a pen. And I sat down at my own kitchen table, and I started writing. It took my father about 90 seconds to notice. "Francis, what are you doing?" "My job." "Excuse me?" I didn't look up. That's a thing you learn. If you look up, you're in the conversation. If you keep writing, you're the record. 3:11 in the morning, I read back. Gil Hollis. "Bernie, if they come to you, Whitney's been at the house since midnight." 3:11 in the morning, Bernadette Hollis. No verbal response. 3:12 in the morning, Gil Hollis to Whitney Hollis. "Go through your phone before anybody asks for it." Nobody said anything. 3:14, I said. Whitney Hollis. "Do I delete the texts to Marcy or just the thread?" "Stop it," Whitney said. 3:15 in the morning, Whitney Hollis. "Stop it." She came across the kitchen and put her hand flat on the pad. "You think this makes you important?" "I think it makes it accurate." "Nobody cares what you write down, Frankie. That's the whole point of you. You sit in the corner and you type what other people say, because you've never in your life had anything of your own to say." The kitchen was very quiet, and I said the only true thing I said all night. "That's right. And you've been talking for an hour." He didn't yell. I want to keep saying that, because if he had yelled, it would have been so much easier. He pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, which he never does, and he folded his hands. And he used the voice, the arrangement room voice, the one that has walked 4,000 people through the worst week of their lives. "Can I say something to you?" he said. "Not as your father, just, can I say a thing?" "Okay." "You've built a whole life on a Saturday in 1998. I stopped writing. "You think I don't know? Francis, you've been punishing me for the roses for 27 years. You took a job where a machine tells you what's true, so you'd never have to be a person who decides. That's not integrity, honey. That's hiding." I did not have a response. "And here's the part you're not going to like." He leaned forward slightly. "You already said yes. In 2013, you sat in your apartment and you told a kid on a phone that you were driving, and then you went to work and you took down a deposition. You slept fine. Don't look at me like that. I called you that night. You were fine." "I wasn't fine." "You were fine enough." He let that sit. "So you don't get to stand in a kitchen at 3 a.m. and tell me you're a different woman than you were 12 years ago. You're the same woman. You've just got a better excuse now. And it's got a number on it, and a pension attached." He was right. I need you to hear me say that clearly, because I could take it out, and none of you would ever know. He was right about all of it. I did pick that job so a machine would decide. I did sleep in 2013. And the thing I felt in my kitchen at 10 minutes to 3 was not, "Is this wrong?" I knew it was wrong. It was, "What does it cost me?" That's not conscience. That's arithmetic. My father spent 34 years reading people at the worst moment of their lives, and he was, right up until the end, the best I have ever seen at it. He read me perfectly. He just made one mistake, and it was the same mistake he made in 1998. And it took me 27 years and a man in a road to find it. He thought that because the easier version doesn't hurt the person in front of you, it doesn't hurt anybody. There's always somebody. In 1998, it was a woman named Arlene's daughter who spent the rest of her life believing her flowers came and wilted, which is a small enough thing that I still don't know if it counts. That night, it was a 63-year-old man in surgery whose name nobody in my kitchen had said out loud. Not once. In an hour and 40 minutes, I checked the pad. I had it in front of me. Nobody had said his name because nobody had asked for it. I want to tell you about 31 minutes past 4 in the morning. Everybody had stopped talking. Whitney was asleep, sitting up on my couch with her coat on. My father was on my back step with the door cracked, smoking, which he quit in 2009, and which my mother has never known about. And my mother and I were alone in my kitchen for the first time that night. She had still not taken her coat off. I sat down across from her and I said, "Mom?" And she said, "Well?" That's my mother. That's the whole vocabulary. 22 years of parish council minutes and a marriage to a man who narrates. And she has one word, and it's "well," and it means 11 different things. "If I do this," I said, and I stopped. I want to be exact because I have spent my life being exact. I did not say I won't. I said, "if I do this." She looked at my hands. "If I do this," I said, "I lose the license." Not right away, but it'd come out. These always come out. And then they'd pull 2013 too. And it's 19 years. And I'm 3 from the pension, and I don't have... Mom, I don't have another thing. This is the thing. Well, and if I don't do it, Whitney goes to prison, doesn't she? And my mother said, "Probably." And then she said the first complete sentence she'd said in 2.5 hours. "Your father's already told the Kaminskys you were driving." I said, "What?" "He called Ed Kaminsky at 10 to 3 from the hallway. He told him you'd been driving and there'd been an incident and to expect it in the paper." 10 to 3. That was the same call. That was the call where he came back and said, he's alive, he's in surgery. He had made 2 calls in that hallway. He'd come back with the good news and kept the other one in his pocket. He had put it out into the county before he ever asked me. My mother looked at the table. "That's when I knew," she said, "that he wasn't going to ask you. He was going to tell you." At 20 minutes to 7 in the morning, I drove to the safety building on Erie Street. Not because I'd had a moment of clarity. I want to be careful about that. There was no moment. I drove there because I'd realized that in about 4 hours, a detective was going to sit down across from me anyway. And I have been in that room 1,100 times, the other side of it. And I know exactly what happens to people who wait. The detective's name was Andrejko. She had a travel mug that said "World's Okayest Golfer" on it, which somebody's kid clearly bought her, and she drank out of it the entire time. And the first thing I said, before I said one word about my sister, was this. "Before we start, I need to tell you that in October of 2013, I gave a false recorded statement to an insurance adjuster. I said I was driving a vehicle that my sister was driving. There was property damage, no injury. I want that on the record before anything else, because I'm about to tell you something, and you should know what my credibility is worth." She put the mug down. She said, "Okay." She said it exactly the way that kid on the phone in 2013 had said. "Okay, great, thanks so much." And it landed about 10,000 times heavier. I want you to understand what that cost, in plain terms, because I think there's a version of this story where I sound noble, and I'd rather not be in it. A court reporter who has knowingly given a false statement has a problem. Not a criminal problem, 12 years later, past the limitations. A licensing problem. I self-reported to the state board that afternoon, before anybody could do it for me. Because I have watched 200 people learn the hard way that the sequence matters more than the substance. I gave them everything. The date, the adjuster's company, the amount, my father's phone call, my own decision. 19 years and a clean number, and I handed it to them in a 2-page letter at 4 in the afternoon on a Thursday. And here's the thing nobody tells you about doing the right thing 11.5 years late. It doesn't feel like anything. There's no lift. I drove home and I sat in the car in my own driveway for 20 minutes, and I felt exactly as bad as I had that morning, plus tired. Detective Andrejko told me, plainly, what I already knew. My statement was a statement. My legal pad was a document created by an interested party. My testimony about what my father and sister said in my kitchen was one woman's word against 3. And one of those 3 was a man who had buried half the county's parents. And one of them was a candidate. And one of them was my mother, who had said almost nothing all night and would be believed by anyone. And I was a woman who had, 40 minutes earlier, volunteered that she'd lied about this exact thing before. "I'm not telling you it's worthless," Andrejko said. "I'm telling you it's not a case." She had 48 hours before the prosecutor's office would have to decide whether to charge the registered owner of the vehicle, which is me. By Friday morning, my father had done what my father does. He didn't call me a liar. That's not the instrument. He told 9 people, in confidence, that he was worried about me, that I'd been under a lot of strain since the divorce, that there had been a situation in 2013 as well. He put my own confession into circulation as evidence that I was unwell. My sister gave a statement Friday afternoon in which she said she was not certain who had been driving, that she had been at a fundraiser, that she had ridden home with someone whose name she'd give when she'd checked, and that her sister had access to the vehicle at all times. Access to the vehicle. It's mine. It's my car. She had my keys in her fist in my kitchen. That's a beautifully built sentence, though. I'd like whoever helped her write it to know that I noticed. It doesn't say a single false thing. 2 people from the courthouse called me. One was a bailiff I've known for 11 years, and he said, "Frankie, what the hell?" And the other was a judge I will not name, who said nothing at all and just let me talk for 9 minutes. By Friday night, I had a lawyer, no case, 31 hours left, and a father who had made me the story. On Saturday morning, my mother came to my house. Alone. She has not driven on the highway since 2016, and she took surface streets from Point Place, which is 40 minutes, and she showed up at my door at 8 in the morning with her handbag on her arm and her coat buttoned. She sat down at the same chair, at the same table. "Well," she said, and she took out her phone. It's the same phone she's had for 6 years. There's a school picture of my niece under the clear part of the case, and it's 4 years out of date, and my niece has asked her 9 times to change it. "Thursday morning," my mother said. "I was at adoration. I always turn it on at adoration because Father Crawl talks so soft and I do the bulletin." She turned it over in her hands. I forgot to shut it off. 4 hours and 11 minutes. From the moment she walked into my kitchen at 22 minutes past 2 until the moment my father drove her home at 6:33. All of it. Every assignment. Every rehearsal. My father saying, "Nobody's hurt by the version that's easier." My sister saying, "Do I delete the text to Marcy or just the thread?" My father in the hallway at 10 to 3 saying, "Ed, it's Gil. Listen, there's been an incident and Francis was driving." And then, 40 seconds later, calling back into the kitchen that Dell was alive. Everything I had written on a legal pad with nobody to back it, in the voices of the people who said it. My mother put the phone on the table between us and did not let go of it. "I'm going to ask you something," she said, "and I want a true answer because I'm too old to be handled." "Okay." "Did you already say yes? In your head, at any point Thursday night, did you say yes?" I could have said no. I have thought about that. There was a version where I said no, and she gave me the phone, and I never had to find out whether it mattered. "Yes," I said, at about 10 to 3, for about 4 minutes. She nodded, once. "Well," she said, "that's the first true thing anybody said to me since Thursday." And then she didn't move. She sat there with her hand on that phone for, I count when I'm nervous, 110 seconds. And I watched a 66-year-old woman decide whether to end her marriage in my kitchen. Because that's what it was. Let's not pretend. She was not deciding about evidence. She was deciding whether to be the woman who handed the police a recording of her husband and her daughter. At 66, with no job, no money of her own, in a parish where my father's name is on a building. And I couldn't wait. I had 31 hours and I could not wait. And so I said the thing I said. And I have never told anyone this either. I said, "Mom, you've taken the minutes for 40 years for people who never once asked you what you thought. Don't get to the end of it having never said one true thing out loud." She looked up at me. And I watched it land. And I watched it work. And I knew in the same half second that I had just used my mother's entire life as a lever. She slid the phone across the table. "Well," she said, "I got what I needed." I want to be very clear that I got what I needed by doing to my mother the exact thing my father did to me. I used the softest place in a person to move them where I wanted. I am not going to sit here and tell you I've made peace with that. 9 months later, I have not. She left. I drove the phone to Andrejko at 10 in the morning, and I did not listen to it first, which was a choice, and which my lawyer told me later was the smartest thing I did that entire week. I got a copy 3 weeks after, through counsel, when it was already in the file. 4 hours and 11 minutes. I listened to all of it. Twice. Because I am who I am, and at 3:52 in the morning, there's a gap. Everybody stopped. You can hear the furnace, you can hear my sister breathing on the couch, my father is outside on the step, and you can just barely hear the storm door not latching, which it doesn't. And my mother says, quietly, to nobody, in an empty kitchen, not knowing she's recorded, "She's the only one of you who's never lied to me." 4 seconds of nothing. Well, once. 11 seconds. She knew. She had known about 2013 for 12 years, and she never said one word to me. Not one. In 12 years. And she still counted me as the honest one. And she was still alone in a kitchen at 4 in the morning, being scrupulously accurate about it. That's my mother. That's the whole woman in 11 seconds. And I had lived with her for 18 years and worked a mile from her for 19 more, and I had never once known she was in there. I'll be quick about the outcomes, because they're the least interesting part, and anybody who tells you different is selling revenge. My sister was charged with failure to stop at an accident involving serious physical harm, which in Ohio is a felony, plus tampering with evidence for the texts. She took a plea in the spring. 18 months, out in 11. Her driver's license is gone for 5 years, and the felony means the county work is gone forever. She withdrew from the race by press release on a Tuesday. The boxes of mailers were still in the mudroom in shrink wrap in August. My mother finally put them in the recycling in September, 4 at a time, so the bin would close. My father was charged with obstructing justice and complicity. He pled to obstruction. No prison. 69 years old, no record, and a county full of people whose mothers he buried. 2 years probation, a fine, and 200 hours. He does the hours at a food pantry on LaGrange, and, I'm told, is very good at it. And I believe that completely, because he's good at everything that involves being calm in a room with people who are frightened. The thing that actually ended him wasn't the charge. It was the tape being read into the record. Ed Kaminsky's son-in-law was in the gallery. It was in the paper within a week. A funeral director who spent 34 years being trusted with the worst day of your life, telling his wife to say a thing that wasn't true, at 3 in the morning, in his daughter's kitchen. You can survive a conviction in this town. You cannot survive that. My mother was not charged. She was never going to be. She had said nothing all night, which is the only thing that had ever protected her. And this one time, it worked in her favor. She moved out in June. She lives in a 1-bedroom in Sylvania near my aunt, and she has, at 66 years old, a checking account with only her name on it for the first time since 1979. She has not divorced him. I don't ask. And me. The state board found that I had knowingly given a false statement in 2013, which I had, and that I had self-reported 11 and a half years late, which I had. Formal reprimand, 30-day suspension. It's in my file permanently, and it will be there when I retire in 3 years. 30 days is not a punishment, financially. 30 days is what it feels like to walk into the same building where you have worked for 19 years and have people be very, very kind to you. Del Ramsey was in the hospital for 6 weeks and in a rehab facility on Central for 4 months. He has a rod in his left femur, and he lost a piece of his hearing on that side. And he did not go back to Burndale, because you cannot do a custodian's job with that leg. And he was 14 months from 30 years. There was a restitution order. There is always a restitution order. It does not cover a person. I never went to the hospital. I thought about it about 40 times, and I did not go. Because I could not construct a single version of that visit that wasn't for me. 9 months later, I got a letter. Real paper, real envelope, blue ballpoint. Verna Ramsey, Dell's wife, 61. She'd had the hip done in October, which is the reason he walked. It was 1 page, and I'm going to give you the part that matters. She did not thank me. I want to say that because I think people expect the thank you, and the thank you is not what happened, and the thank you would have been much easier to receive. She wrote, "I have read everything in the paper, and I understand you gave them the tape. I am not writing about that. I am writing to ask you one question, and I would like you to answer it honest, even if it is not a kind answer. Because I have had 9 months of people being kind to me, and I am full up on it." In the car, and in the kitchen after. Did anybody say his name? I had the transcript. Of course I had the transcript. I'd read it 4 times, and I'd typed a clean copy myself, at my own machine, at my own table, because I could not stand to have somebody else's format on it. 4 hours and 11 minutes. The words, the man, 11 times. The pedestrian, 4 times. The guy, twice. The situation, 9. Delbert, Dell, Ramsey, Mr. Ramsey. 0. Not 1 time. Not by my sister, who hit him. Not by my father, who spent 34 years learning every family's name before he shook a single hand. Not by me. I wrote her back, and I did not soften it, because she asked me not to. No, nobody said his name. I checked the whole record twice. I'm sorry. She wrote back 1 more time, 3 weeks later. 4 sentences. The last one was, "Thank you for not making it nicer." There's a thing at the top of every transcript I have ever produced. It's called the caption. It's the boring part. Court, county, case number. And then the parties. Who's in the matter? 19 years. Every single job. The first thing I type is the name of the people this is actually about. When I made my own clean copy of those 4 hours and 11 minutes, the one nobody asked me for, the one that isn't evidence, the one that's just for me, in a drawer, in my house, I put a caption on it. It says, "In the matter of Delbert Ramsey." He isn't a party. It isn't a court document. It's not correct, and any reporter in this state would tell you so. I don't care. It's the only thing in this entire story that I did purely because I wanted to, and I have never regretted it for 1 second. There are 3 things I would like on the record before I stop, and then I'll ask you something. On my father, he was not a monster, and I would ask you not to make him one in the comments, because if he were a monster, this would be a much less frightening story, and I need it to stay frightening. He was a man who was extraordinarily good at making unbearable things bearable, and who never noticed the year that turned into making untrue things comfortable. There is no alarm that goes off. It's a slope, and the whole slope is paved with people thanking you. If you have ever softened something for somebody you love, and you have, all of you have, the distance between that and my father is not as far as you'd like it to be. It wasn't as far as I'd like it to be. I found that out at 10 minutes to 3 in the morning. On my family. For 41 years, my family said I was the one who just writes down what other people say. They said it at Thanksgiving. They said it to donors. My father said it in a room with a microphone. And not one of them, not once, in 19 years, followed that sentence all the way to the end of itself. Because if I am the woman who writes down exactly what people say, then the only thing you have to be afraid of is saying it in front of me. They weren't afraid. That's the part I still can't get past. They stood in my kitchen for 4 hours, and they were not afraid. Because being unafraid of me was the one thing they'd all agreed on since I was 15. On me. I did not do this because I'm honest. I've told you what I did in 2013, and I've told you what I said to my mother to get that phone. And I've told you that the first thing I thought about was my pension. I did it because there was a red lunch cooler in a road for 6 hours, and nobody in my family had asked what his name was. Being the person nobody looks at is not the same as being the person nobody sees. I spent 41 years confusing those two, and I let my family do it because it was quieter. And it turns out the record does not care who was quiet. The record only cares what was said. So let me ask you honestly, and I'd like the real answer, not the nice one. If your sister stood in your kitchen at 17 minutes past 2 in the morning, and you had already done it once, 12 years ago, and nobody had ever found out, would you have said yes? And the harder one, the one I still don't have an answer to. Was it right to say what I said to my mother to get that phone? Or did I just do to her exactly what my father did to me and get lucky about which side it landed on? Tell me. I read every one. Everything in this video is fictional, written for storytelling and reflection. If it reminded you of somebody, I hope it reminded you gently. Being loyal to your family has never meant being the person who carries what they won't. The right people will say your name, especially when you're not in the room.